5 wooden poles stood on the hill like broken crosses, rising against the harsh Arizona sun. From each one, a body hung, stretched tight by ropes at the wrists and ankles. They were tall and strong women, their bodies bruised and torn, skin marked by whip scars and dried blood. The ropes cut deep into their flesh, pulling their limbs wide, holding them there like trophies left out to rot. Their chests moved just enough to show they were still alive. Barely. Silas Ward stopped walking. The wind carried the smell of dust and old blood. For a long moment, he could not move his feet. He had seen death before. He had walked past it more than once. But this was different. These women were not dead. They were waiting to die. One of them lifted her head. Her eyes were dark and dry. But something still burned inside them. Life, stubborn and refusing to go out. Her lips were cracked and pale, shaking as she tried to speak. What came out was hardly more than air. Please do not leave us here. The words cut through Silas deeper than any blade. Not because they were weak, but because they came from someone who had already lost everything and was still asking. Silas felt his chest tighten. 12 years ago, in Tennessee, he had heard cries like that. Smoke in the air. Screams cutting through gunfire. Back then, he had turned away. He had told himself there was nothing he could do. He survived that day. But the sound of those voices had followed him every mile since. This time, Silas Ward did not turn away. He walked straight up the hill. He laid his shotgun carefully on the ground, slow enough to show he was not afraid. Then he pulled his knife free. His hand shook as the blade met the first rope. He cut slowly, carefully, like the smallest mistake might steal the last breath from the body in front of him. The first woman collapsed into his arms. She was heavy. Solid, real. The smell of dried sweat, dust, and blood clung to her skin. As he lowered her to the ground, the torn cloth on her back slipped aside. Silas froze. Her back was covered in old scars. Deep, twisted marks. Burns that looked like they had been made with heated iron. This was not punishment. This was not war. This was torture done with time and intention. Silas's heart hammered in his chest. Another memory forced its way in. A muddy clearing. A young girl being dragged away by soldiers. His own boots frozen in place. His eyes turning away. He swallowed hard and kept cutting. The second woman fell. Then the third. Then the fourth. Each body hit the ground with the same terrible weight of someone who had been treated like an object, not a human being. By the time he cut down the last one, Silas was breathing hard. Sweat soaked his shirt. His knees pressed into the cracked earth as he knelt among them. Not this time, he whispered. Not this time. He carried them one by one to his cabin. He did not ask their names. He did not ask where they came from. He gave them water, clean cloth, and silence. The kind of silence that lets broken people breathe. When the oil lamp lit the small room, Silas turned his face away for a long moment to steady his hands. Their injuries were worse in the light. Bruises layered over scars. Wounds old and new tangled together. One of them opened her eyes. She looked at him for a long time. Her gaze was steady, sharp, despite her weakness. When she spoke, her voice was rough but strong. "You did not abandon us." Silas nodded once. Outside, the Arizona wind moved through the grass. Inside that worn cabin, a choice had already been made. Silas felt it settle deep in his bones. Whatever came next, he would not walk away again. The sound of hooves reached him just as the sun dipped behind the hill. Silas stood up at once. He did not need to look out the window to know how many were coming. War had taught him how to count danger by sound alone. 10 horses stopped in front of the cabin. 10 men dismounted, covered coats, rifles on their backs, whips hanging loose. At their sides, at the center, stood a man with a clean-shaven face and eyes like cold stone. A thin smile rested on his lips. "Old man," he called out, "I came to take back what was stolen." Silas stepped onto the porch. His shotgun rested in his hands, barrel low but steady. The wind lifted his coat, showing the lean frame of a man who had survived more storms than these men ever would. "There is nothing here that belongs to you," Silas said. His voice was calm and flat. Only people. The foreman laughed. A few of the men behind him laughed too. "People, you do not understand. They are mine." They ran. "I am here to take back what is mine." Silas did not answer. He stepped half a pace back, placing himself fully in front of the cabin door. Inside, the room was silent, but he could feel 5 pairs of eyes on his back. One of the men moved forward, his hand resting on his rifle. "Step aside, old man. This has nothing to do with you." Silas raised the shotgun just enough for everyone to understand. Not fast, not angry, certain. "Take one more step," he said, "and I will shoot." Silence dropped over the land, thick and heavy. Even the wind seemed to pause. The foreman narrowed his eyes. "You think you can stand alone against 10 men?" Silas met his stare. "I have stood against more than that." The foreman laughed again, but this time no one joined him. He spat in the dirt and turned his horse. "Fine, keep them. But remember this. You just chose a side." The 10 men rode away, dust rising behind them as they disappeared over the hill. Silas did not move for a long time after they were gone. He knew they would be back, and next time they would not come to talk. He went back inside and locked the door. Then he leaned the shotgun against the wall and began counting bullets. Outside, night began to fall over Arizona, fast and cold. Inside the cabin, no one slept. Asterisk. Night settled hard over the land, colder than Silas expected. The wind howled through the hills and pressed against the cabin walls like a warning. He slid the heavy wooden beam across the door and braced it tight. One by one, he reinforced the windows with old planks, hammering them in place with steady hands. Outside, darkness swallowed the hills. Inside, the oil lamp burned low. The 5 women lay around the small room, resting but not sleeping. Their eyes were open, alert, watching every movement. Fear lived in the room, but it did not rule it. Silas leaned his shotgun against the wall and sat at the table. He began wiping each bullet with a dry cloth, slow and careful. The soft click of metal made one of the women flinch. Her hand tightened around something hidden beneath her blanket. Silas noticed without looking up. "There is no need," he said quietly. "If they come, I will hear them first." One of the women pushed herself upright. Pain pulled at her face, but she stood anyway. She was tall, taller than Silas, her shoulders wide and strong, even under bruised skin. Old scars crossed her back like a map of survival. The lamplight caught her eyes. They were calm. "We are not hiding," she said. "If they come back, we stand with you." The others followed her lead. One sat up and broke a broom handle in half, testing the weight in her hands. Another tied her long hair back, quick and practiced. A third checked the small knife hidden near her ankle. No one cried. No one asked for mercy. Silas looked at them, really looked at them, and felt something shift inside his chest. He had seen men break under less than this. These women had been hung up to die, and still they stood. "You do not need to do this," Silas said. That the tall woman shook her head once. "They left us to die. If we die again, we die standing." The words settled into the room like stone. Then a sound rolled across the land, deep, slow, not hooves, not gunfire. Silas stood fast and moved to the window. "What drums?" he whispered. One of the women answered without hesitation. "Tribal drums." Her voice carried something close to relief. Silas tightened his grip on the shotgun. He did not know if those drums meant help or more blood, but he knew one thing: no one in this cabin was alone anymore. The men returned just after the moon climbed over the ridge. No shouting this time. No voices, just shapes moving through the dark. Silas heard boots on gravel, slow and spread out. He raised his hand. The oil lamp was blown out. Darkness swallowed the room. The first shot shattered a window. Wood exploded inward. Silas rolled aside as glass and splinters filled the air. He fired once. The shotgun blast lit the room for a breath. A scream answered from outside. He did not pause. Gunfire tore through the cabin. Bullets punched into the walls. Dust fell from the ceiling. A shot burned across Silas's shoulder. He grunted but stayed upright, changing position, firing again. Outside, men shouted and cursed. One rushed the front door and fell before he reached it, his body hitting the dirt hard. Two others circled around back. Silas heard the door crack under a heavy blow. Then the fight was no longer his alone. The back door burst open and a shadow flew forward. One of the women slammed the broken wood into a man's face. Bone cracked. He dropped without a sound. Another raised his rifle, but a blade flashed and buried itself into his arm. His scream split the night. More women rushed out, moving fast, striking hard. They fought without hesitation, their bodies tight and sure. These were not helpless victims. These were survivors who had already faced death and refused it. Shots rang out. Screams mixed with breath and dust. Then the drums sounded again. Slow, heavy, close. The gunman froze. "What is that?" Someone whispered. The answer came without words. Figures appeared along the ridge. Not one, not two. A line of Apache warriors stepped out of the darkness. Moonlight washed over painted faces, feathers, spears, and old rifles. They moved in silence, spreading wide, surrounding the men who had come to kill. Fear broke the gunman's resolve. No one fired. A young warrior rushed forward and struck. A rifle from a man's hands. Another was pulled down into the grass. Ropes tightened around wrists. Within moments, the fight ended. Every gunman stood disarmed or bound, alive only because the warriors chose it so. Silas lowered his shotgun. Blood ran down his arm, but he barely felt it. He was watching something older than law, older than towns and guns. An elder stepped forward. His hair was dark with silver running through it. His eyes moved first to the women, then to Silas. "You cut the ropes," he said. Silas nodded. "And you fired the gun?" "Yes." "Why?" Silas looked at the women who stood beside him, once hanging, now unbroken. "Because once I turned away," he said, "and I will not do that again." The elder studied him for a long moment. Then he turned to his warriors. "Take them," he said. "They will answer to the laws of the tribe." The gunmen were dragged away. Silent now, the elder faced Silas again. "You stepped into our path," he said, "but you did not step as a thief." His eyes moved back to the women. Now it is their choice. Dawn crept in slow and pale. The land looked burned clean after the night. The warriors waited. The women stood together, backs straight. The elder spoke. "The tribe will take you home. There will be protection." The tall woman stepped forward. "We had protection once." Left to die, another spoke here. "No one owns us," a third added. "No one turns away." The last woman met the elder's gaze. "We are staying." The elder nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Then this choice is honored." The tribe moved away without another word. The cabin stood quiet again, a tea, but it was no longer the home of a lone man. Asterisk. Morning came soft and pale over the Arizona grasslands. The wind moved gently now, no longer sharp, as if the land itself was catching its breath after the night of blood and drums. Smoke from the broken cabin walls drifted low and thin before fading into the open sky. Silas Ward stood outside his door, his wounded shoulder wrapped tight with clean cloth. The pain was there, steady and burning, but it did not own him. What weighed heavier was the stillness left behind. The Apache warriors stood in the distance, calm and unhurried, their work finished. No cheers, no victory cries. Just quiet respect. The elder stepped forward once more. His eyes rested on the 5 women standing beside Silas. Their bodies were marked and sore, but their posture was strong. They did not look like women who had been rescued. They looked like women who had reclaimed themselves. "You have endured enough," the elder said. "The tribe will take you home. There you will have land, law, and protection." Silas stayed silent. This was not his decision. The woman who had spoken first the night before stepped forward. Her voice was steady. "We were under protection before, and we were hung up to die." A ripple moved through the warriors, but no one interrupted. "Here," she continued, "no one asks who we belong to." Another woman stepped beside her. "No one touches us without permission," the third spoke. "No one looks away." The fourth nodded. "We choose this place." The last woman looked at Silas just once, then turned back to the elder. "We are staying." The wind dragged dry grass across the ground. The elder studied them, not with anger, but with understanding. Some wounds did not heal by returning home. "Then this choice is yours," he said at last, "and the tribe will honor it." He turned to Silas. "You gave them a place to stand, not a place to hide." Silas lowered his head, not in pride, but in respect. The tribe left as quietly as they had arrived. No drums followed them this time, only the sound of feet on grass and the wind rolling through open land. The cabin stood unchanged, scarred by bullets and broken boards. But it was no longer empty. The days that followed came slow and steady. The land around the cabin began to change. New grass pushed through the dry soil, thin but stubborn. Each morning, Silas noticed it when he opened the door. It felt like the land was remembering how to live. The women worked without being asked. One patched the roof, another repaired the door. 2 more raised a new fence from fallen timber. Their movements were strong, practiced, sure. No orders were given. No thanks were demanded. This place became theirs by action, not words. Silas worked beside them, not as a protector, not as a savior, just as a man who belonged. In the evenings, they sat on the porch together. The fire crackled low. Insects hummed in the grass. Few words were spoken. Silence no longer felt heavy. It felt shared. One evening, one of the women placed wildflowers in an old tin cup on the table. Silas stared at them longer than he meant to. It was such a small thing. But for him, it felt like proof that something gentle could still exist. 12 years ago, Sticky Silas had survived war and believed the cost of survival was being alone. Now he understood the truth. Surviving alone had not been the cost. It had been the punishment. As weeks passed, the cabin grew larger. A second room was added. A cooking fire was built outside. A storehouse took shape for winter. The same women who had once been strung up to die now built a place where no one would be left behind. One evening, the woman who had stood at the front of every choice came to stand beside Silas. She did not touch him. She did not need to. "You never asked where we would go," she said. Silas shook his head. "If I had asked, you might have thought I wanted you to leave." She nodded slowly. That is why. We stayed. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the dirt. Silas no longer dreamed of Tennessee every night. The cries he once carried began to fade, replaced by the sound of shared breath and quiet work. Silas Ward did not save lives to become a good man. He saved them because turning away would have ended what little of him remained. His kindness did not change the entire West, but it changed the fate of 5 women. And in doing so, it changed his own. Sometimes, that is enough. If you felt this story in your heart, remember this. Not every family begins with blood. Some begin with a simple decision: stay, to stand, and to never turn away again. Asterisk.